Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, I'm bringing you guys Week 14 defenses to stream for fantasy football in 2020. We are finally here. We are in the fantasy football playoffs for, I would say, a majority of leagues. Now, some leagues will end up starting in week number 15, so maybe we're almost there for you. In a lot of people's situations, we are there. We made the playoffs, and we did it. If you guys want to win your 2020 Fantasy Football Championship using the tips and tricks and all these videos that I give you guys on a weekly basis, please make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button down below. Not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win that 2020 Fantasy Football Championship. And real quick, before we get into the defenses to stream for week number 14 to help you guys get that edge on your opponent, I'd like to give you guys a quick word from my friends and my sponsor over at OverlayDFS.com. OverlayDFS.com is my favorite way to play daily fantasy sports on the internet, and it is so simple. You're going to maneuver onto the matchup shop on OverlayDFS.com, and you're going to find multiple matchups for tonight's game. Now, more are going to open for the later game tonight, but as of right now, as I'm recording this, they only have the earlier game for 5 o'clock, but there's always more matchups added up to kickoff. Now, how it works is it's pretty much which fantasy football player is going to perform better. Deontay Johnson versus Chase Claypool. Claypool +1 fantasy point, or Deontay Johnson -1 fantasy football point. You can click on whoever you want. Say you think Johnson's going to outperform Claypool, and you can bet any amount you want. $100, you can do as low as like $1 if you want. You can bet as low as you want, and you can go ahead and acquire money over time that way. It is so easy to win on OverlayDFS.com. I plan it every week, and it is tons of fun and super simple. You guys do so much research on a weekly basis to win your matchup, so why not win some extra cash on top of it on OverlayDFS.com. And we are back. Let's get into it. Week 14 defenses to stream. We begin with the Seattle Seahawks versus the New York Football Jets. Now, we all know that the Seattle Seahawks don't have the greatest defense on earth, but last week up against the other New York team, the New York Football Giants, they acquired 2 sacks, 1 INT, 1 safety, and 17 points allowed. They would have had a fumble return for a touchdown or a kick blocked for a touchdown, but it ended up rolling out of the end zone, which resulted in a safety instead of a touchdown. So we could have even seen the Seattle Seahawks defense put up even more points in that matchup. I understand they lost to the New York Football Giants, but the defense was still very stout in that matchup. Now, I know what you might be thinking, Nick, that's because they're playing up against Colt McCoy. Who really cares when you think about it? The Jets have Sam fucking Darnold, who hasn't looked good since last season, if I'm being completely honest with you. This was his first game where he threw a touchdown since September. Last week up against the Las Vegas Raiders. Week 13 at the New York Football Jets had 3 sacks, 1 INT, 2 fumble recoveries, and 28 points allowed. Again, while the Seattle Seahawks don't have the greatest defense in the NFL, when you're facing up against the New York Football Jets, it's normally a smash matchup for the defense. So I love the Seattle Seahawks this week up against Kid See Ghosts Mono Man Sam. Next defense here, we got the Tennessee Titans at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, the Browns defense week 13 versus the Cleveland Browns. What I meant to say was the Titans defense week 13 versus the Cleveland Browns. Clearly, again, just like all these defense to stream videos, I need to fire the guy who makes these slideshows for me, puts all this information on the screen, even though that guy is me, because I always somehow mess it up. Titans defense week 13 versus the Cleveland Browns, 1 fumble recovery and 41 points allowed. They got a train ran on them by Baker fucking Mayfield and friends in Cleveland. That was a murder. They even let an O-lineman score on them. The Titans just got butt-fucked in that game, somehow crawled back in, but ended up losing in the end. But the difference between the Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars is a whole lot. I know in the past, the Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars have been bottom dwellers in the NFL, but recently the Browns have actually gotten good, whereas the Jacksonville Jaguars decide to start Mike Glennon over the Minshew man, Gardner Minshew. Vikings defense week 13 versus the Jacksonville Jaguars had 2 sacks, 2 INTs, 2 fumble recoveries, 1 safety, and 18 points allowed. And the Minnesota Vikings don't even have a good defense in reality. They have just an average defense. The Titans defense, in my opinion, is either slightly better or just around the same caliber as the Minnesota Vikings. So knowing that alone, just strictly based on the matchup, I feel like the Tennessee Titans are a very worthy defense to add this week at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, this video is in order of defenses I would want to add. So Seattle was 1, this team is 2, and then we will continue down the train until we get to the last defense we talk about. Next one here, the Carolina Panthers versus the Denver Broncos. Now, the Panthers did have a bye week 13, so we have not seen them except for week 12, which was obviously 2 weeks ago. Panthers defense week 12 at the Minnesota Vikings had 2 sacks, 3 fumble recoveries, 2 tutties, and 28 points allowed. Now, the Carolina Panthers defense is not some absolute electricity like they were a couple of years ago when they made the Super Bowl with Wham Bam Cam Newton, but they are going up against the Denver Broncos this week, and the Chiefs defense did play very well up against the Denver Broncos last week. 2 INTs and 16 points allowed. I understand that the Chiefs defense is definitely an upper echelon defense when compared to the Carolina Panthers, but the Carolina Panthers have looked pretty good, and you're going up against Drew Lock. So what this does pretty much is it's a complete and utter dice roll on how good Drew Lock does. Drew Lock is never just a middling quarterback. He either fucking sucks and throws like 2 or 3 picks a game, or he lights it up and just absolutely butt fucks the defense, just bends them over the table and doesn't use any ounce of lube. So you're going to see which one it's going to be this week. That's why I like the Carolina Panthers. They have the upside of getting like 3-4 picks in this game, having a bunch of sacks, just absolutely fucking the Denver Broncos right in the ass, or they could get screwed in the ass. But in reality, I feel like the Denver Broncos offense just isn't that good, and the Panthers have livelied up. They've looked better recently in the season, so the Panthers defense should be fine here up against the Denver Broncos. I like them a decent amount. Next defense here, we got the Cheeseheads, the Green Bay Packers at the Detroit Lions. The Packers defense week 13 versus the Philadelphia Eagles looked very, very good. 7 sacks, 1 INT, and 16 points allowed, but that's not very hard when Carson Wentz stands there and just has no idea that pressure is coming. Once they put Hurts in, it seemed that they were struggling a bit more, the Packers defense, that is, to sack the quarterback. Why? Because Jalen Hurts is mobile. He'll run fucking completely to the left, completely to the right, just to evade some pressure. But you want to know who can't do something like that? Detroit Lions quarterback Matthew Stafford. Now, Stafford actually lit it up and looked quite well on Sunday up against the Chicago Bears, who only got 2 sacks, 1 INT, and 35 points allowed. But when you're in weeks like this, where there's a lot of tough matchups in the NFL, where there's going to be a lot of close matchups where I don't necessarily love too many defenses, the Green Bay Packers will show up here up against the Detroit Lions, and I expect the Packers defense to look good, even though the Lions typically play quite well up against the Green Bay Packers. Next matchup here, we got the San Francisco 49ers versus the Washington football team. If you guys have ended up enjoying this video thus far, please make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button down below. The San Francisco 49ers are going up against the Washington football team this week. Week 13 versus Buffalo. Obviously, we have not seen that yet because that is occurring tonight, a couple of hours from now as you guys are watching this. The 49ers, last time they played defense, obviously, last week up against, or 2 weeks ago in week 12 at the Los Angeles Rams. They had 2 sacks, 2 INTs, 2 fumble recoveries, 1 touchdown, and 14 points allowed up against a very, very good offense in the Los Angeles Rams. So I do expect the 49ers to look pretty tout up against the Washington football team and Alex Smith, considering they've looked just so much better since Richard Sherman has returned. Now, does this mean that Richard Sherman is the piece to the defense that they really needed? No, but maybe that's a motivational factor for the team. And besides really Nick Bosa, the whole defense seems to have been clicking as of recently. Obviously, Bosa is out for the season with a torn ACL. Washington has not played week 13 yet versus Pitt, so we don't even know about how they're going to look, obviously, tonight up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I would assume not amazing because the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is good. Cowboys defense, week 12 up against the Washington football team, 3 sacks, 1 INT, and 35 points allowed, but I wouldn't look too deep into the Cowboys defensive stats against the Washington football team. Why? Because the Cowboys defense is dick cheese. Schmegma, as they call it in the doctoral sense. They are awful. So fucking bad. The 49ers defense, while has looked bad in the past, like they got absolutely ran by the Green Bay Packers, but recently they've looked a little bit better just like against the Rams, so I expect the 49ers to look very good up against the Washington football team. Final defense to add of the week, we have the Arizona Cardinals at the New York Football Giants. Cardinals defense week 13 versus the Rams, 1 sack, 1 fumble, recovering 32 points allowed. Now the Rams did obviously look bad up against the San Francisco 49ers, but they looked very good up against the Arizona Cardinals. But the Arizona Cardinals defense isn't amazing. I have never once claimed that, but they are playing up against the New York Football Giants, who skimmed to a win up against the Seattle Seahawks. Skimmed, slid in there by the fucking grit of their teeth or whatever that analogy is. They barely got by in this matchup up against the Seahawks defense, and the Seahawks defense is even worse than the Cardinals, if not on the exact same playing field. So I feel like the Arizona Cardinals defense should be able to lock up against the Giants. 2 sacks, 1 INT, 1 safety, and 17 points allowed for the Seattle Seahawks defense against the Giants in Week 13. But again, they probably should have had a punt return for a touchdown, which would have boosted their stats. I'm not saying the Cardinals are going to do that, but I think at the end of the day, the Giants aren't that amazing of a team. Sure, they're the leader in the NFC East, but a bunch of fucking scrubs could be the leader of the NFC East, because that's what the Giants offense is. I believe the Arizona Cardinals defense looks good, and if you're in a deeper kind of league, they're definitely a defense that should be available as my final defense to pick up on the week. So thank you guys all so much for watching this video. Again, if you ended up enjoying it at any point, please make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win that 2020 Fantasy Football Championship. So make sure you guys check out overlaydfs.com. Link down below in the description. I love you all. Have a great rest of your guys' day. As always, good boy!